When you hear Singapore history, you probably think of Raffles in 1819. But how do we even know what Singapore was like before that? Was Temasek real? Were there people living here? Or is it all legend? Today, we're going to be history detectives. I'll show you how historians use sources to build the story of early Singapore, and how you can use the same ideas to score in source-based questions. By the end, you'll know exactly what constructed knowledge means, and how to explain it in an exam answer. First thing, historians cannot time travel. They can't go back to the 1300s and fly a drone over Temasek, so they rely on clues left behind. We call these clues sources. Historians ask questions like, was there a port here? Who lived here? What was life like? Then they gather sources, think about them carefully, and from there, they construct a story. And this story is not fixed forever. When new evidence appears, the story of early Singapore can change. First big group, written sources. One example is Chinese records. A traveler called Wang Daiwan wrote about a place he called Dan Ma Kwai in the 1300s, which many historians think refers to Temasek, near modern Singapore. There are also Malay stories, sometimes called chronicles, that talk about Singapura, its rulers, and attacks on the island. Later on, European writers, like Portuguese officials, also wrote about this region. These written sources give us names and events, but they can be biased. They might be written much later, and sometimes they mix fact with legend. So historians can't just take them blindly. Next, archaeological evidence, objects people left behind. Since the 1980s, archaeologists have dug at places like Fort Canning Hill and along the Singapore River. They've found imported Chinese ceramics, glass beads, coins, and other items from about the 14th century. That tells us a lot. Imported items suggest trade with faraway places, not just a kampong in the middle of nowhere. It points to a busy trading port here long before 1819. But remember, objects cannot talk. We need to interpret when they were made, where they came from, and how they ended up here. Third, there are old maps and drawings. Some early maps show a settlement or island labeled with names that sound like Temasek or Singapura. These maps show how people at that time understood this area. Biennial. They're not always accurate in shape or scale, but they still tell us that this place was known and important enough to be drawn and labeled. Again, one map is not enough. Historians compare many maps and descriptions to see patterns. Let's put it together. What does it mean to say that knowledge of early Singapore is constructed? You can think of 4 steps. Historians collect different types of sources, ask questions about each one, compare and cross-check them, and then recognize gaps and update the story when new evidence appears. Step 1. Collect different sources. Historians gather different types of sources: written records, artifacts, maps, and later description. Each one gives a small part of the picture. No single source tells the whole truth. Step 2. Ask questions about each source. They ask, who made this? When did they make it? Why did they make it? Who was the audience? For example, a Chinese trader describing Temasek might focus on trade and safety. A later European writer might focus on politics or war. Knowing their purpose helps us judge how useful they are. Step 3. Compare and cross-check. This is a key word, corroborate, to support one source with another. Imagine a written record says Temasek was a busy port in the 1300s. Archaeologists then find 14th century Chinese ceramics and coins in Singapore. These 2 sources support each other. Together, they make it much more convincing that there was a thriving port here. Step 4. Recognize gaps and update the story. Sometimes, sources disagree, or there are time periods where we have very little evidence. In those cases, historians use phrases like likely or probably. They suggest the most reasonable story based on what they have. When new digs uncover more artifacts, or when someone rereads an old text more carefully, historians may update the story of early Singapore. That's why we say knowledge is constructed, not fixed. For a long time, many people thought Singapore didn't matter much before 1819. But once archaeologists started digging at places like Fort Canning and the river area, and historians revisited Chinese records and other texts, the picture changed. The artifacts showed trade and wealth here in the 1300s. The texts spoke of a place that matches this island. Put together, they suggest a thriving settlement at Temasek many centuries ago. So, our knowledge of early Singapore expanded from little or no history to a long connected past with the region and the wider world. That change happened because historians combined new evidence with old sources and reconstructed the story. Let's wrap up with what you actually need for tests. First, knowledge is built from different kinds of sources: written records, artifacts, maps, and later descriptions. Second, historians don't just list sources, they question them and compare them, looking at who made them, when, and why. Third, as new evidence appears, the story is updated. That's why we say knowledge is constructed. It's built from evidence, not guesses. If you see the phrase, "How is knowledge constructed?" your answer should mention at least different source types, how historians cross-check them, and how new evidence can change our understanding. Now pause the video and try this. In 1 or 2 sentences, explain how we know Temasek was a real trading port, using at least 2 types of sources. When you're done, check your answer against the checklist linked below.